Four teenagers have been charged and beaten to death. A 16-year-old boy by the name of Derrion Albert, and this happened in Chicago, Illinois, in the inner city there of Chicago. And it's been reported that the 16-year-old boy was on his way to school or from school when he saw a gang fight happening. And some people are saying that he jumped in there to try to help or stop the fight, and he was beat to death. He was just, I mean, when you see the videotape of this, it is heartbreaking. I mean, it really makes you sad to see this happening. But I have to tell you that violence in Chicago is nothing new. This has been going on forever and a day. I remember when I was a teenager and I would go to Gary, Indiana to, stay there for a little while. I would hear about violence in Chicago, gang violence in Chicago, starting with a group called the Black Stone Rangers. And it was reported that they were a very violent black group there in Chicago. It was so bad that my parents did not want me to go over to Chicago from Gary because they were afraid for my life. And this was back, in the 60s, 70s. And so violence in Chicago, black on black violence in Chicago is nothing new. And because they have not done anything about it, it has gotten worse instead of getting better. I notice now that these kids or thugs are not afraid to come out and fight in front of the police officers now. They have no fear of police officers there because they know that these people are not going to do anything about crime, black on black crime in Chicago. And I also blame the so-called civil rights leaders for what is happening in Chicago because I don't know if you remember or not, but in time gone by, years gone by, whenever police officers attempted to go into the inner cities to deal with the black on black violence, they were called racist. The so-called civil rights leaders were crying, "You're just doing this to black people, driving while black and black on black crime, and why are you just pointing at black people?" Remember? They called the white officers racist when they would go into the inner cities to try to do something about the black on black crime. And if they didn't go in, officers did not go into the inner cities, they were called racist. And if they went in, they were called racist. So they're damned if they do, and they're damned if they don't. And it has gotten to a point where a lot of the officers, especially white officers, are afraid to do anything about black on black crime because if they do, they run the risk of losing their careers, losing their jobs. And you have the so-called black leadership, the civil rights leaders to thank for that. And that include these so-called black preachers who are not called by God, but by their mama anyway. They don't want the crime issues resolved in the black community. They want black on black crime out of control for the money. It brings in a lot of money from the government. It also gives them power. It's been going on in Chicago for a long time, and the people who are in charge have refused to do anything about it, and primarily because the so-called civil rights leaders complain whenever police officers go into these communities around the country and try to resolve or solve the black on black crime. And unless that can happen, it's not going to get better. And these so-called civil rights leaders, these black preachers are no good, folks. They don't want the issues of violence to end in the black communities around the country because it is bad for their business. It's bad for business. As long as black people are killing one another, having abortions, having children out of wedlock, it brings in a lot of money for the so-called black leadership. I want to give you the solution to the black on black crime in inner cities around the country, and not just in Chicago, but around the country. It is not hard or to resolve this issue. And I'm sure I am not the only one who understands this. Here are the solutions to resolving the crime in Chicago. Let Barack Obama know about this, the Messiah, the prophet, the anointed one. In the lives of most black people, their personal Jesus. And by the way, Chicago is his hometown. And he's supposed to be an expert in community organizing. Why did he organize these black thugs in Chicago? Here's the solution. One is that you got to put police officers in the communities around the country. You got to put them in there and allow them to do their job without the threat of being called racist or being fired for doing their jobs. They got to take these folks, arrest them, and put them in jail. Put them in jail and let them rot there, so other young black kids can see if they do these type of crimes, commit crimes, they too are going to jail and they're going to rot in jail. The problem is jail is like a hotel vacation for these folks. They're coming out heroes. Put them in jail, let them suffer. So you got to put police officers in the black communities around the country and allow them to do their jobs. The next thing you have to do is less government involvement, folks. No more welfare checks, no more affirmative action, no more free stuff from the government for these black folks. Put them to work. If these people have to go to work, they wouldn't have time to kill each other. Put them to work. No more government. No more welfare checks. Make them find a job, cutting grass, working at the car wash, working in restaurants and hotels around the city. Put them to work. The less government in your life, the better off you are. Another solution. How about parents? They need fathers and mothers to get married and guide them, discipline them, guide them in the right way to go. Isn't that like an easy idea or easy solution? Instead of these black folks having all these babies out of wedlock and letting them raise themselves, why not demand that black people get married before having a baby? And I tell you what, if they cannot get a welfare check for having a baby, I guarantee you they'll get married or not have one. 70% of black babies born out of wedlock, ridiculous. And we are taking care of them. The tax people who are paying taxes. How about making these folks get married before having these children out of wedlock? All right, so the solution is put police officers in the communities around the country, including Chicago, and allow them to do their job. No more government. No welfare checks, no affirmative action, no food stamps, no free rent, no free nothing. Put these folks to work. And then make black parents be responsible for their children. If they can't afford to have them, they will not have these babies and put them out on the streets. They need morality in their lives, folks. Most black people are suffering not because of racism, but the lack of moral character. These black children are immoral. And I guarantee you, if you could talk to them, their mothers and grandmothers are Christians. They go to church, but they lack moral values. So put those suggestions in operation. You could solve the problems of violence, black on black crime in the inner cities around the country, and not just in Chicago. All right? But around the country. They need value in their life. These black people are angry. They're demoralized. They're brainwashed. They're not in control of their own lives. And until that happens, things are not going to get better.